Really sure you know what you're getting into? Do you really want to work in the solar industry? If so, here's how to properly install a SOLADECK. To do is take it out of the box, take off the cover, and inside you'll find an instruction manual. Read through these instructions. We're going to go by these step by step in kind of our own order. Since we're at the warehouse, we're going to go ahead and prep these SOLADECKs. We're going to prep this SOLADECK for a 4-string configuration. In order to do that, we need to drill out our holes in the bottom of the SOLADECK to make this one accept 4 strings. So we'll take our drill, and we're going to drill out these outer 2 holes to accept a 3/4 inch strain relief and one of the smaller holes for grounding. First we'll drill a pilot hole. Edges in here, you can either bend them out with your finger or use the unibit to kind of get the rough edges out. Usually they just bend right out. Just be careful the metal doesn't burn you or cut you. Alright, next we're going to put sealant on the connections. I'm going to go ahead and take the metal shavings out of here.
Okay.
To prevent water from getting inside. Just a small bead will work. Put it into the SOLADECK and put the lock nut on the other side. Go ahead and thread it on by hand. Just let the sealant set up, and then we'll go back and channel lock tighten each of them. It's much easier if you take the end of the connector off. That way when you're going to tighten it in, it doesn't lock up and then cause you to have channel locks to take it back off. Or close to one side, because we'll use it for wire management. The copper will come into here, go out, do a 90 degree, and go up to the rail. So we can zip tie all of our other PV wires going up to the rail. And we have one last connector. With this style of SOLADECK, the ground lug is usually in the way of the connector, so you want to go ahead and put the lock nut in there. As I previously talked about having the back end of the connector on, go ahead and remove it, because it's much easier to tighten. And grab a pair of channel locks. While still holding the lock nut inside.
Just get it snug, not too tight.
I get it tight. You don't want to over tighten it though, because it is plastic. One thing you do want to line up is the top of the connectors. You want the flat part of the connector here so the cover goes on properly as well as these lining up as well. The cover will go back to about here. Drilled out, everything's sealed up inside here. You want to go ahead and put the ends of the connectors back on. Depending on your location of the SOLADECK, you may want to put weep holes in case this builds up with moisture. In order to put a weep hole in, you'll grab a small drill bit. You just want them low. So I drilled 2 here. So we've got our SOLADECK prepped. We need to go ahead and cut the template out of the cardboard box. Use scissors or a razor knife. Cut right along the dotted line. Now we're going to choose a good location on the roof. So we're at our mock-up roof, and we've got our template here, and what I'm going to show you is how this correlates with the SOLADECK. So this is the part we're actually cutting out. We need to find where the truss is at, because if we were to mount this anywhere we wanted to on the roof, and our penetration through the roof deck ended up on a truss, we'd be in trouble and have to move it over, and we'd have to recut shingles, and it'd be a big mess. So take your hammer and find the truss. We know this is our truss. You can hear it. So we want to locate our SOLADECK slightly to the right of it. If I can, I like to line up these screws to go into a truss instead of just the roof deck, and the rest of them will go into the roof deck. So I'll put my SOLADECK up, and I'll put my template right here. I'll line my template up with the bottom edge of the shingles, and mark this out with a crayon. There's no need to mark the bottom edge because you're going to end up cutting it off. Then you can either take a pair of snips or a razor knife and cut the shingles out. First we'll need to pry them up. Okay, so we've just marked out the shingles for our template for the SOLADECK, and now we're going to use a pry bar to pry up the shingles so we can install the SOLADECK. As I was prying into the shingles, I noticed I hit a nail under here. I located that nail. Please keep track of your nails if you have to remove any, and put them in your pockets. They won't fall off the customer's roof and end up in a lawnmower tire. Alright, these shingles are pretty loose, so we're just going to use 10 cents to drum them. Make sure your template fits inside of the shingles you cut out. I need to make some quick adjustments right here, so I'll just go ahead and round this out. When sealing a SOLADECK, we have our caulk gun. We would apply a large bead of sealant around the entire outside, go back in, around through here, and around our penetration point. It's very important that a lot of sealant goes around this penetration point. That way when we install the SOLADECK, it will mush out onto the roof. But before we apply our sealant, we need to drill a hole through the roof deck with our hole saw. So go ahead and take the SOLADECK, push it up into the shingles that we just cut out. And as you can see here, we've got this cut out. With the shingles, this edge should line up with the bottom edge of the shingles here. So we'll hold that right there and go ahead and mark out our hole center. So where our hole saw is going to go through. Set your drill to 2, torque setting all the way up. And go ahead and drill your hole out for the connector. Alright, there's your hole. Go ahead and brush the shavings off the roof. Alright, realign your SOLADECK with proper fitment. Make sure we're all good. And go ahead and install your connector. For this one, we're using a 1-inch compression connector for EMT. Go ahead and insert the connector, and on the opposite side, install the lock nut. And use a pair of channel locks to tighten it down. The nice thing about compression connectors versus set screw connectors in the attic, when you have it through the roof deck, you can get your pair of channel locks here and tighten the connector from inside the attic instead of trying to tackle it with a set screw, because you have nails sticking out and you'll most likely cut your hand open. So go ahead here. This is where we would apply sealant. In this demonstration we're not going to, but you want to start your bead here, work yourself all the way around. Come back down, go around where the holes are at, go back through here, and I usually end up here. And then I also put a large bead around the connection.
So 3 horseshoes and 1 circle?
So 1, 2, so 1, you can go around, so 1, 2, and then 3.
3 lengths of a spiral.
3 lengths of a spiral.
Okay.
And then 1 fat bead around the connection point.
Got it.
And lift your shingles up here. Slide the SOLADECK in. Be careful not to tear the shingles, and put your connection in. Go ahead and line this up with the bottom edge of the shingle. And then we'll take our Phillips head bit, put it on impact. And in the SOLADECK, we'll use the long penhead screws provided. The first one I install, just so you can keep your SOLADECK level and square, is the one inside on the din rail. When you know you've had the adequate amount of sealant should start squirting through the other hole that's inside here as well, just below the din rail. Then start by lifting the shingles up. Might be on a nail there. You want to apply as much pressure so the sealant will actually physically come out of the side of the SOLADECK but not so much to where the screw gets stripped in the deck. Without destroying the roof and ruining the shingles, there are 2 other holes up here, but it's almost impossible to get to them since they're up here. So I usually leave the last screw out. But at least I have 4 here, and I have 2 inside. Next we'll grab our SOLADECK cover, and in the manual it instructs you to It instructs you to install the foam gasket 1 inch from the bottom of the cover. So to do this strip of tape is about 1 inch. Install that there. And what that does is seals this part of the SOLADECK when you have the cover on. There are 4 included screws. You want to make sure you do not lose these. So I go ahead and pair up the bolt and neoprene washer. In the SOLADECK, there's also the included bag. I just go ahead and put these in the bag. Put our cover aside and set these right in there. While you're working on the SOLADECK, you don't have to put the cover and the screws in. You can just simply put the cover on at the end of the day, and when you come back, take the cover off until the job's 100% done and your wire is both from the root terminated in here from both the DC array and your wires going to the inverter. Since this is a 4-string SOLADECK we're setting up, we want to go ahead and install our pass-through kits. These are pass-through kits for 4 strings called a PN, or part number 10604, DC pass-through 4-string. We've already installed our string reliefs. We just need to install our positive and negative terminals. They already come pre-built. This is going to be our negative terminal. You simply clip them in. And our positive terminal. One thing I do want to mention with these, they stay pretty well locked in as they are. But to remove one, you simply take a screwdriver and pull up. On your end connections, you need to have a protective cover over it. That way, nothing comes in contact with live parts. So take the last one out and then reinstall it.
Could you show again how to take one out?
Yep. Take it out, use a small screwdriver. And this
Pull
comes
the
out.
latch.
Pull the latch and lift. There's also a special notch inside here, so these pass-through terminals interlock with each other. Then simply put the protective cover over the terminals. Snaps right into place. And then reinstall the terminal. You can put these close together. In this ideal instance, I want to have it between my 2 string reliefs coming from the array, and these wires that'll come out here will eventually turn around and terminate into here.
5, 6, 7.
So now we're going to install our grounding bushing or bonding bushing onto the connector. You want to do this before you put your terminals in. Okay, as you can see, I screwed this down tight, but my screws will go here and here, so I need to loosen it back up and install my longer screw here, which penetrates the connector, and my smaller one on the opposite side.
Along being the set screw.
I don't like this idea.
Okay.
So here, I'm gonna actually put it here. and then another one here.
Does the fitting have to be tight?
Fitting
Or
does not have to be tight
Does not have to be tight.
because you're going to penetrate it with this screw. So go ahead and lock this down. You want to hold the lug straight while you do it. But you want this lug to end up down here or somewhere where you can access it with a screwdriver. Then you'll come in from an angle and go as far as you can with a screwdriver.
Tighten up your set screw.
And what you can't, yeah, dude, this isn't gonna work out with this video, but oh well. Then
That's
you'll
fine.
use channel locks or needle nose pliers. I prefer channel locks because you can get more bite on them. You want to tighten this screw all the way down. So it bonds to the connector. You'll feel it inside. It'll literally bow out the connection point inside the EMT connector. And just verify that it's not going to move. Alright, now that we've got that, we're going to reinstall our pass-through terminals. You always want the part that you would take off with a screwdriver to be on the bottom. So they click in like so. And for this, and from, what I'm saying, we're going to use a stop in the middle of them to separate positive and negative. So I'm going to go ahead with the first one. I have to get one more. I'll pause it. Screwdriver, and we're going to tighten the last stop. You don't need to put plastic bushings on these connections here because they're plastic, and the PV wire we use is dual insulated or single insulated but twice the thickness, as you can see here. So it's very abrasion resistant. If you have it going through a metal conduit though, I definitely recommend a plastic bushing or bonding bushing when you're going in through metal conduit. So essentially we would have ground coming from the rail here. You want to take it, and you'll usually have an excess amount going through as like a loop from the rails. Go ahead and push it through our grounding. Let's see, our pass-through terminal for the ground, and put a bend on it. So it'll end up like this. Take a large flathead screwdriver and undo the terminal closest to the pass-through, the strain relief. You want the wire to go all the way out the other side, and go ahead and tighten it down. Always install the ground first. That's another thing I don't like about these, they get loose. Then make a nice bend. Another bend going up to where your rail would be. Next, we're going to start with our negatives. Our negatives are clearly marked 1, 2, 3, and 4. They'll be on the roof just like this. Go ahead and take the bottom end of your strainer leaf off. Take your finger, push it through, and you can see this is a 5-hole strainer leaf. Go ahead and take a screwdriver and poke out 5 of the holes. In this case, I would poke all of them out because when you go to tighten the connector, it'll tighten around each one of them so you don't have any issues. So take your 5 wires, first put this on, and you've got 1, I'm gonna pause it. My wires up to go into my strainer leaf. I like to have 1 here, 2 here, 3 here, and 4 here. So it's a good configuration once you get it into the SOLADECK. When you line it in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Go ahead and push those through. And make sure your 1 is on the bottom. Feed that through. Go ahead and get the outer part of the strainer leaf on. Then take your channel locks and tighten it down. Go loosely when you're tightening it down, because if you squeeze too much, it'll cross thread. And when you see the rubber starting to come out of the back, which you can't see too well through here, you know it's tight enough. You don't want to over tighten it because it'll cross thread and it could possibly break.
Is that 2 though?
This is 2.
Right.
Bottom, bottom, top, top. Because when I grab them, it's going to go like this. Bottom, bottom,
Yeah.
top, top. So I'm going to start out with string 1. Do a nice bend here. But I don't want the bend to be right up against the edge of the connector. So I'm going to push it over slightly. And then go right into my terminal. Thank you. Go ahead and cut that, and I'll strip. Normally you want to use Southwire's strippers. They strip up to number 6 gauge, and it's a lot easier with this thick jacket, so you don't nick the actual copper conductors. This is exactly how much you want to strip off, and you want to verify that by pushing the wire into the terminal. As you can see, it goes all the way to the back of the terminal, and the insulation goes into the plastic of the terminal so you don't have any copper exposed. If you have copper exposed like this, you're going to have a problem with arcing. The copper needs to go all the way inside the terminal and the insulation as well until it stops. Before we put this on, these are our negatives, so we're going to go ahead and mark these with white tape. On the negative, since I don't have room to put up to 4 wraps of tape, I'll put 1 wrap of tape showing this is negative. Even on a transformerless system, I'll still use white tape to designate negative because you can't see black tape on black wire. Then you'll take this screwdriver, which it's a Klein 601, which fits perfectly into the terminal block. While you're tightening it down, also push the wire into the terminal. Tighten it down to assure a good snug fit. Then go ahead and mark on the tape This is my string 1, so I'm going to put one small mark. Just in case the tape were ever fall off or to be removed, I also put another single mark on the insulation of the wire. Repeat these steps on the negatives. Next, I'm going to grab number 2. I know number 2 is down here. As long as you get the same method of doing it the same way every time, you don't have to think about it. You can know, I put my first one here, my second one there, my third one here, my fourth one here. And then repeat those on every job, and then it becomes just second nature. Line it up to there. So you want a nice even bend here, a bend to there. I know that the end of my terminal sits right there. The strip gauge is just about ½ inch, a little less. And what you can do is take a piece of wire and strip some off. Lost a couple strands there, but you can kind of line it up. Let me do another one. Definitely use the south wire strippers. Mine broke in half, or else I'd have them out here right now. But you can see the insulation needs to go inside the terminal, and this is the end of the terminal right here. So as you can see, that fits right in, and you're up inside there with your insulation of the wire.
Not far enough to not make contact.
Correct.
Because if you stick the insulation in too far, then you're not going to be able to lock in the terminal. You're going to have a dead string, and you're going to be troubleshooting it for a very long time until you found out that you had insulation compressed inside the terminal.
Which is very easy to do with THHM. I like my tape to line up, so I'll go ahead and put my terminal in, or my wire in my terminal, and then I'll put a piece of tape right on it. Two notches for string 2. Then I go to my thirds wire. And we've got our strain relief cap and our grommet. We're going to go ahead and push our positives through the strain relief. We're in the same configuration as the negatives. We have, I'm going to cut this off. +1, +2, 3, and 4, just how we have them over here. So go ahead and push this in, push the strain relief into the connector. You gotta kind of work it in there. And make sure all of these go in. Sometimes the little tabs will break off.
In which case we would use another fitting.
Right. Okay, let's see what happens. The gromet's still pushing out of the bottom. Oh, I'm gonna get another one. They're lined back up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Something is right. Oh, I know why. Duh. It's backwards. That's why. Caught it. So, when I tried to put these wires in, the grommet was put on backwards. You want the part with the holes in it to go into the connector, and the tapered end has to fit into the tapered end of the connector. This ensures a weather-tight seal. So as you can see, we have 1 and 2 on the bottom, 3 and 4 on top. So we'll go ahead and push those back in. And then rotate the wire and the grommet into the connector, maintaining our 1, 2, 3, and 4 wire placement. Now, the connection should thread on. There we go, I grabbed. Take your channel locks, finish it the rest of the way. Just do it by hand. The ground you bottom out. And you can see it's a good tight fit. Alright, so we're going to start out with string 1. So we're tightening this connector back down. We moved it so the wires would line up better going into the terminal. And you want to keep your pairs exactly how they are coming out of the strainer leaf going onto your bare copper. You want the bare copper to be on the bottom, your wires on top. That way, if for any instance they were to fall down to the roof, they're not going to get abrased by the shingles.
And your copper wire is landed on the grounding log on the adjacent rail.
Correct. Now when you put your zip ties on, you want your zip ties to go all the same direction and facing down. So I always get in the habit of feeding the zip tie through this way and also through the rail. So when you pull them down, you've got them right there. Pulling down snug. And we're also going to get another zip tie here. So this one's going to go down, always down or to the side. That's exactly what we want to see. And clip the end of it off flush. And then flush. You can turn this one. But the nice. All I need to find string 1 negative. I can know it's going down from here. And sure enough, this one's taped string 1. So, as
So
long
you're
as
saying
you
is if you don't rotate the wires, if you maintain the same order,
the same order throughout
it's easy
here,
to trace.
It's easy to trace when troubleshooting. And then these will go to their respective rails. We've got our AC conductors now ran through the SOLADECK, and first we're going to make up our ground. What you want to do is bend the wire down so it'll go into the terminal and kind of finagle it with your fingers. What I'm going to do here is you can either mark this with a marker or your hand. I'm going to mark it with a marker where it's going to go into the lug. Once you have it marked, take your strippers or a razor knife and braze the insulation. Go ahead and peel the insulation off. Take a long, small screwdriver. And get your bending wire in there. This may take some time just at the angle you're at. You do want to make sure though that the wire stays at the bottom of the lug. That way none of the strands come out when you tighten the screw terminal down. That's good. Verify that your lug is not loose. And for this one, I'm going to loop my wire around the terminal. And then go into my lug. I can either do it this way, or I could come down. But as you can see, I'm losing strands when I'm bending through here. So I'm going to go back around. It's too much tension on the wire. Go ahead and strip this off. If you want to do it with a razor knife, you just simply look at how big the lug is. Take a razor knife, score this very gently. Strip down and then use your finger now. Take the outer THWN to jack it off. Or you can score the wire. And then that breaks away. Grab our large flathead screwdriver. And place the ground wire into the grounding lug. You want to make sure you have copper on both sides. only for ground modes. And for aesthetics, we'll go ahead and put a slight bend on the wire. Like so.
And then also check this with a larger screwdriver.
Alright, first we're going to make up our positives. We're going to start with positive number 1. These wires are identified with Sharpie. I also sometimes like to use tape. I didn't like how the ground wire ended up. It would have interfered with my positive and negative home runs to the inverter, so I went ahead and changed the ground around a little bit.
Just want to make sure all these strands
Stay inside that lug. And as you can see, bonding bushings are very difficult in a SOLADECK.
but you want to get them very snug, otherwise
They're not doing what they're intended to do. So take this wire here and kind of gauge where you're going to cut it. Then you can size it up. You can actually put it in there without putting the lug in. Alright, that's good.
go ahead and make our score here.
And as you can see, I didn't nick the wires, and you can easily just pull this off. You just score the wires. There's no nicks on the copper whatsoever. We'll make sure our screw's loose. Put in our wire. And as you can see, you have copper on both sides. This is so you don't have any insulation going under the screw. Alright. You can either leave a loop all the way in the top of the SOLADECK, or you could leave a courtesy loop like this. With the amount of wire we have here, we're just going to loop into the top of the SOLADECK and go down. We want to leave these leads longer so we can put a clamp on meter and check for current at the array. Since we're not going to be able to get a clamp on meter of any of the PV wires or into here, we want to leave these long enough so we can check a current rating. So we'll start out with our positive number 1. Looks good right there. Go ahead and clip this off, strip, and put it in the terminal. These are a lot easier because it's a smaller wire with same size wire but smaller insulation, so it goes in the terminal a lot easier. We'll next look for 2.
We are using number 10 PV and THW and 2 wire. No, not all 10 number 10 gauge wire sold out there is THW and 2 rated, which is required for PV installations. So we have to make sure it is dual rated or THW and 2 rated.
Okay, at 3, that is 4. Any kinks in insulation like this I normally don't like to use. I like to have my wires a little longer. So I would normally pull this out, and as you can see that kink in there, it's just a bubbling of the insulation. So we'll see how it ends up here. It's going to be in the SOLADECK, but it'll be alright. 1, 2, there's 3. We're definitely cutting this part off, which is bad. That's from the wire being bent over in the reel. That'll happen.
And you can also have these, you can finagle these wires in the conduit. So they line up better. I try to keep my positives on one side, my negatives on the other.
But the picture you guys showed me that Mark did, his loops weren't layered. He had a loop, hold on, he had a loop and then another loop on another loop, and so they were like smacked on top of each other. If you do a loop in a sense where you're gonna loop it in, you wanna loop this one, he had it like this. You want them all to
No, you could
Separatable.
there's a one, you want to be able to separate.
You could fan through them.
Okay,
But we got to go through and redo that box anyway.
so. Alright, so we've got our negatives landed. Just want to try to organize those as best you can inside the SOLADECK like this. And we're going to go ahead and mark them very close to the wire, to the terminal. So we've got one. And just go ahead and mark all of them. This one's 2, 3. And 4, and as well right here. If you make a mistake, you can easily wipe it off and remark it. Alright, that's it. You want to leave these looped in instead of just going directly into the terminal, like I said, so you can do a current check by pulling these out. Mainly on the positives, not so much on the negatives, but it is very helpful if you're troubleshooting a ground fault. And that's a completed SOLADECK. Alright, so the screws we put in the bag with the neoprene washers, we want to go ahead and take those out before we put the cover on. Simply put the cover on like this. And keep the remaining screws in the bag and hold on to them so you don't lose them down the roof. And if you look over here, these line up pretty well. I usually start with the top ones and just screw these down. It's a self-threading screw. Until the slight amount of the rubber pushes out. You then go to the other side. Get rid of that. Gotta go do something. Okay, so when we installed the SOLADECK, we went ahead and sealed everything on the bottom. We've got our screws in through the SOLADECK into the roof and here, and also one under the din rail. Before you put the cover on and get it all caulked up, we need to caulk around the SOLADECK. So you want to start out by putting GSL under here, and back and forth motion, then work your way up here, under here, as well as around here, under these shingles, under these, and then lastly start in the middle and do a nice fat bead around the SOLADECK and stop here, and do another one from here and stop there. Once that's done, you want to apply pressure, and sealant should seep out of the bottom of these shingles, and it's just a nice clean bead of what you cut out of the shingles. Once that's done, I usually let it dry, because if you try to put the cover on immediately after, the sealant will stick to the cover, and then when you go to pull it off, it rips everything off. So I let that dry. Assuming the sealant's already dried, I usually wait about an hour or two. I'll go ahead and put the cover on with my 10-in-1 and the screws provided.
And that one went off the roof. If a screw does fall off the roof, don't panic. Just try to shout to somebody on the ground or follow where that screw went. Hopefully it ends up in a gutter. With these SOLADECKs, you only get 4 screws. So it's very important you keep them in the bag and only take out what you need. Do not put these in with a drill either, because if it's too much torque, it'll strip out. And then you're gonna have to find a larger screw to fit the hole. And lastly, apply your sticker. Warning, electric shock hazard. No user serviceable parts inside. I usually apply this right above the sticker that's there.
That's it. That's how you install a SOLADECK and wire it.